Hi, I'm Nick Thomas and welcome back to the Academy of Historical Fencing. I'm bringing you another video on sword terminology, although in this case it will be more like dagger terminology, because we are going to be talking about the dirk or dirks. So there are two forms of dirks, or two things that historically were normally called dirks. So let's start at the beginning and work with the earliest one. Now, the most iconic form of dirk is the Highland or Scots dirk, which is this. So this is a very high quality reproduction of one, representing something around about the 1700 period, because dirks did change in terms of fashion a little bit over time, although fundamentally they were always the same kind of tool or weapon. So they probably derived from the earlier bollock or ballock dagger, which was a common form of medieval and Renaissance dagger, and it looks kind of similar. It's just the balls here are usually a little bit larger, if you like, and yeah, so the dirk probably derived from that. Now, what it is fundamentally a large knife or dagger. It's particularly stout, if you like, and it's designed as a multi-purpose weapon or tool. So you're going to use it for everyday uses, hunting, self-defense, you take it to war as well. It meant a lot of different things, but specifically in the Highlands, this is where it was used, the dirk as we know it of this form, is it also had massive cultural significance. So they thought of their dirks almost as if, maybe a close comparison might be the way that the samurai thought of their katanas. You know, it was basically a huge part of their cultural heritage, and bonds were formed on it, and oaths and all sorts of things. So culturally hugely significant, commonly carried day to day, and then used as a sidearm in battle as well. So there are examples of it being used with broadswords, for example, and of course there's a famous usage of them being used with the Taj, the small shield that the Highlanders used, with the dagger in the hand inside the shield and protruding a little bit from it. So yeah, it got used as a general purpose tool and weapon. Now the name dirk is unclear where it came from, because that's not what it was called in Gaelic. There's speculation that it came from a Scandinavian language or Dutch. There's some potential links there, but nobody knows exactly for sure. What is certain is that the term dirk came into the English language sometime in the early 1600s, so the early 17th century. And this is the kind of typical form that you think of by about 1700. In fact, early dirks were sometimes double-edged, whereas the iconic dirk as we know it has a really thick, stiff back edge to it, a spine, so it is a mini backsword, if you like. And, you know, throughout Highland culture, it remained really, really a big deal. And even then, when the Scots, the Highlanders went into the British Army, for example, officers and others were able to still continue carrying them, and you can see examples of them being worn alongside their regimental broadswords or backswords. Now, in the 1700s, something else happened, and that was the term dirk started to be used for more than just the Highland dirk, and it seemed to get some use as basically any large dagger, so basically a stout dagger, and specifically in a military context. And at that point, the term starts to be applied to this, which, you know, fundamentally is not vastly different. It's still a long-bladed dagger. This example is double-edged, and they usually are double-edged, to be honest. So that is one difference. But, you know, fundamentally, how different is it? Well, fashion-wise, it's different. As a weapon, not hugely different. But what was the reasoning for this? Well, the main reason is that naval officers wanted to have something more practical. So this, in common terminology you'll see today, will be called a naval dirk. And even that isn't hugely helpful, because the army did see some usage of them as well, although not as iconically as the navy. And commonly it's thought of as a midshipman's weapon, which is also inaccurate. In fact, the dirk was common and popular with officers of all ranks of the Royal Navy, and for one simple reason, apart from the fact that it's a fashionable little piece, is it's a hell of a lot more practical than wearing a sword. So anybody that's actually been onto a tall ship or a square rigger will know that it's cramped, and wearing a long-bladed, let's say 32-inch bladed straight sword day to day is an absolute pain, and let alone going ashore and on small boats and things like that. So wearing a full-length sword is an absolute pain, and as a result, dirks got to be used. and they were worn in place of the sword. So you often see them hung in the same suspension system that the sword were carried in. And of course, it makes perfect sense, is that an officer aboard a ship isn't having to lug all their gear, halfway across the continent like an infantry officer is it's all aboard the ship, which is why you often see reference to captains having multiple swords, for example, because they can just hang in their own quarters in their cabin, and they can pick and choose the weapon for the occasion, and they're not having to lug them and store them and everything else. And as a result, officers of all ranks, from midshipmen all the way up to admirals, did like to use the dirk for a daily wear item, and it became so fashionable that it even got used for ceremonial purposes on various paintings of all sorts of officers, again of all different ranks. And that's it. And there are some references to them being used by the army. So, for example, there's one particular artillery officer, quite famous, say, horse artillery officer in the Napoleonic period, who despised the spadroons so much, which officially, whilst he was a foot artillery officer, he should have been using spadroons. He eventually famously became horse artillery, and he disliked spadroons, and he said when they were away from camp, they just wore dirks in place of them. So, for that purpose, exactly the same thing. They were carrying a little dagger in place of their sword because, for practicality's sake, it was just a hell of a lot easier than having to have the hassle of a full-length sword. And to this day, you'll still see the Navy using dirks across the world as a symbol of basically authority and fashion still. And so that's it. Those are the two forms of dirk. So the Highland or Scots dirk, which is usually single-edged, particularly as time went on. They were usually single-edged, this thick spine, and they have the two sort of small balls reminiscent of the old bollock or ballock dagger. The grips did change a little bit over time. This changed, the pommel cap section changed, and as the regimental ones came in, they started to become more and more decadent, if you like, just put in all kinds of over-the-top jewellery onto the grip, to the level that some of them actually became completely impractical as fighting weapons. But by that point, they really were dress wear only anyway. So yeah, the original Scots dirk, Highland dirk, was a good all-round useful tool and weapon that had massive cultural significance to the people who used them. And then what you could call naval, or probably better to call it the military dirk, is a mostly naval officer's weapon designed for practicality and also fashion and a symbol of rank. So that's it. Those are the two dirks for you. Once again, this one is a replica. So this is from Todd Cutler. So it's kind of like outlet store of Todd stuff. Makes really nice stuff. I will do a thorough review of this soon. It's a little bit large actually for the form, which is it's just quite interesting. It's quite a choppy little boy, I would say. And then this dirk here, the naval dirk or military dirk, this is an original. So this is from approximately 1780 up to maybe 1800 at the latest, and you'll see the style of it follows the form of spadroons of the time. It's basically the pommel, the guard, even though it doesn't have a knuckle bow, follows that form. Now, the dirks didn't always look like this. So this looks comparatively similar in that it's a similar length and it's straight. Dirks in the naval usage and maybe army as well, there's not so much evidence of the army, but certainly from the navy, they could be sort of anything that was small. So it's just basically a compact bladed weapon that's easy to carry, and by that I mean it could look like a small saber. So they could be straight and they could be curved. They could have chains on the in a form of a knuckle bow. They could have back straps or pommels. So there's a bit of variety there. The only main characteristic of the naval or military dirk is that it's small. So you're talking about blade lengths, absolute maximum up to maybe 40 to 45 centimeters at the most. So they definitely don't reach sword category, even though some of them do look like a mini sword. So that's it. That is the two forms of dirk for you. I hope you enjoyed the video. I will keep on with the terminology series. And if you'd like the new t-shirt, I'll put the link in the description for that as well. So thanks for watching. Please do subscribe if you haven't already.